is run by a bunch of investment bankers, and Morningstar's tools can help make quick.
Emerging market is kind of a broad definition. Can you narrow it a bit more down for us?
So the classic or standard definition is people tend to look at an index, the MSCI index, which has big weightings in countries like Korea, Taiwan, where GDP per capita is about $20,000 per person, down to places like India, where GDP per capita is sort of sub $1,500 per person. It's a broad spectrum of countries, which gives investors a nice diversification and a nice diversification of living standards. Obviously, the person who enjoys a $20,000 GDP per capita has a far higher standard of living than the guy sitting in India with $1,500 GDP per capita.
And you stated that investors are paying a premium for the real growth. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Yes, if you look at the developed world, what you'll see is really a lack of growth opportunities. So there's a genuine lack of growth opportunities because generally consumers have pretty much everything they need, and also the disposable income is not growing in the developed world, and populations are quite static, they're not growing. Whereas in the developing market, you've got growing populations, rising disposable income, and these translate into growth. So you have a lack of growth, a paucity of growth in the developed world, and as investors keep looking for that growth, I think they'll be prepared to pay a higher price earnings multiple for that growth because it becomes such a scarce commodity when one looks at equities globally.
During the discussion earlier today, the advisors say we do not know enough about emerging markets. Can you give a reason for that?
Well, I think that's quite natural. I think people naturally look at their local area. There's this famous 80-20 rule, so people will be more interested in their local football team, not even their national football team. And so it goes out. So you look at your village football team, then maybe your regional football team, and then your national football team. And you're not very interested in what happens to the English football team, for example. I'm just giving you an example. And so people naturally focus on what they know and what they understand. And places like Indonesia, India, China are very foreign to most people, and they feel uncertain about investing there. So they don't tend to invest in these regions. But I believe that's a mistake because the world is increasingly global. We all sit with our iPhones, Blackberries, etc., internet connections in a global market that's highly competitive. And if one thinks like that, one needs to invest on a global basis because we all face some form of global competition.
Can you give us a few do's and don'ts for the retail investor for investing in emerging market? To start with the don'ts.
Starting with the don'ts, I would say don't put all your eggs in one basket. So don't decide that, and I'll take a country that Russia is the place to put your money. Spread it across countries, across emerging markets, because there will naturally be countries that are flavor of the month that are everyone's putting their money into. So spread your investments across the regions. Make sure that the fund you invested in has a spread across the sectors as well. So you're getting broad exposure to broad-based sectors. And also make sure that you put your money in, you spread the time period over which you put your money in, because you may or may not pick a particularly good or bad moment to put your money in. And the volatility in emerging markets is still higher than developed markets if you look at a daily price movement. So it's really about spreading your risk both across geographies, sectors, and indeed about the time period at which you invest in. But really the key message is keep putting your money to work in emerging markets because I believe that's where the growth is.
Run by a bunch of investment bankers, and Morningstar's tools can help make quick